control the vertigo.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I will be covering a fairly recent anthology series called Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosity. It premiered on Netflix on October 25th, 2022, consists of 8 episodes. Now Guillermo del Toro is heavily involved. He wrote one of the stories, in fact the one we're talking about tonight, and he curated the people to do the others. And he's got the likes of Jennifer Kent, who did The Babadook. In fact, her particular segment stars Essie Davis from The Babadook. One of my favourite filmmakers that have newly emerged for me, the director of Mandy, called Panos Cosmatos, and such like. There's some really interesting stuff going on here. I am only going to talk about the first episode because that's the only one I've seen, but I like this one so much, and I like the idea so much. I am going to go on and watch the rest of these, and I may talk about them in the entire series in a future episode. This is probably, I think, one of my the one that's most I'm looking forward to since probably Love, Death and Robots. I really like that series, recent series, but this one sounds very solid, and there's not just that, it kind of ties back with some of the stuff I've talked about in other anthologic episodes too, so that's kind of cool. So Guillermo del Toro is heavily involved. As I say, he wrote one, he came up with the concept, he sort of gathered the talent, he put it together, he allowed it to run, and such like. And as I say, there are 8 episodes. Now, they didn't all premiere on the same day. Curious release cycle this one was. Basically, 2 episodes of the 8 were released on the 25th of October, then 2 on the 26th, and then 2 on the 27th, and then the final 2 on the 28th. So the all 8 appeared over 4 days. I guess that gives people time to watch a bit and talk about it. I kind of see it. And I don't feel it's particularly unkind to people. I mean, 2 episodes a night is enough, surely, if you really, really like it. So kind of interesting. Now, the first one of the other episodes I just wanted to mention before we go on is episode 5 is Pickman's Model, directed by Keith Thomas. Now, that name may be familiar to you because it's a Lovecraft story, and we did cover it in an episode discussing the Night Gallery, episode 114 of Anthologic. We did a Night Gallery season 2, episode 11, and one of the segments was Pickman's Model. Quite a good one. And so I'm looking forward to this retake of that particular story. I want to see how they do it. So that's number 5 in this season, though. So it'll be, I will be looking at it. Now, Keith Thomas, who directed it, was also, most recently directed the recent Firestarter. Is probably the one he's most known for. But he also did one called The Vigil, which was excellent. I have to say, was really, really interesting horror movie that seemed very workaday and nothing outstanding. Actually, I remember while I watched it until the final act, where it really elevated, and I got quite a profound sort of feeling from watching that film. So the Vigil I thought was really interesting. I haven't seen Firestarter. I haven't heard good things about it, but I haven't seen it, so I won't comment. But I might try and see it though. It'd be kind of cool. But sorry, I'm diverting onto Pigman's Model. Let's go back to the one we're talking about tonight. It's Lot 36. This one's directed by Guillermo Navarro. I hope I'm not butchering that. He was a Mexican cinematographer and television director, and he's won various awards for lots of interesting stuff. He worked on things like Hellboy, for example, Night in the Museum, Zathura Space Adventure, Pacific Rim. So he's done a lot of work, especially with Guillermo del Toro, it sounds like. Interesting sort of pedigree there. I really like the lead in this, played by Tim Blake Nelson, a sort of war vet called the American War Vet. Now, this guy is clearly xenophobic and right-wing. He's listening to shows that confirm his viewpoints that, immigrants be evil and all that sort of stuff. That is a strongly message in this. Now, Tim Blake Nelson, I kind of know his work. He, from one other thing where he was excellent too, and that was called Watchmen. The Watchmen series, he played a character who was kind of like a more recent version of Rorschach, but his name was Glass. The superhero name was Glass. And he's got that Rorschach-y kind of vibe, I have to say. And what I mean by that is it's got the same energy and sort of vibe and feel about him as Jackie Earle Haley does in a lot of his films, particularly when he played Walter Kovacs or Rorschach in The Watchmen. So that was kind of interesting, and he brings a similar vibe here. I could certainly see Jackie Earle Haley doing this role as well. It was that kind of feel. But essentially, he's a man down on his luck. He's scratching around for money, and he basically makes his money by buying old lots and sort of selling off the stuff. But he obviously owes someone a lot of money, and he's sort of down on his luck, and he's going to get something broken if he doesn't pay soon. Anyway, he puts a bid in for a certain lot, which is called Lot 36, the name of this episode, and he buys the rights to it, which means he gets the key to the padlock, the new padlock that they've put on. Now, it turns out there's an older lady who's a Mexican immigrant called Amelia, who couldn't pay for her storage locker for a couple of months, and he wrote, and unfortunately they've sold the contents, and she's saying, but I did ask you to hold it, and the man says, I'm really sorry. We did write to you, and she said, but I've changed the address, and she said she kept ringing, and anyway, by a set of bad circumstances, she's lost all her stuff. However, it was sold to Nick, and the man in charge sort of says, why don't you talk to Nick, and maybe he'll have something left for you? And he just flat refuses unless she gives him $1,000. He's just being a dick, really. Now, there's some other interesting stuff. The guy that runs the lot, there's a bit of contention between him and Nick, but they're reasonably comfortable working together, making each other money, so they're reasonably okay. But he actually shows them a video of the old man that used to own the storage compartment when he visits it, and he does this very peculiar thing in that he goes to the storage compartment and has his head low and does a weird hopping action before he goes in, and then he goes in for an hour and a half, and then he comes out and does the weird hopping action. And I can't remember exactly now if he said he comes for an hour and a half every day or once a week in, week out, since the 40s. But he shows Nick the videotape, but Nick doesn't care. He thinks who cares, he's not that bothered. And he says, well, I thought I might do you a favour. And he says, if you find something really good, don't forget me, and all this kind of fun. We also see some bizarre stuff of the old man getting up from watching TV just before this all starts, and him chopping up massive pieces of an animal, presumably to cook, but it seemed like a lot. But he's obviously chopping up an animal for something, but when he has a heart attack and falls on the floor, all the pieces of animal fall over. So it's kind of gross, actually, and sort of sets the scene. This, I must say, this series looks fantastic. It does look really good, and though I didn't mention it, Guillermo del Toro does present the episode in a way that sort of Alfred Hitchcock does, or Roald Dahl on some of his anthology shows. He's done a couple Roald Dahl and so on and so forth. They're actually standing there presenting it. It's Rod Serling's, Night Gallery. It's that kind of thing. And it's kind of cool. Guillermo del Toro's doing this, and he does it by presenting this weird cabinet where there's lots of drawers and compartments and stuff. So he kind of opens one and pulls out the key for Lot 36 before the story starts. Anyway, Nick does go into the lockup, start digging around and find some very old stuff. He found a weird table and like this three volumes of this weird archaic stuff that looks like it's about demon summoning. Anyway, he goes. The man in charge actually says, "Do yourself a favour, contact these. They'll give you a top dollar for this." And they go to a buyer, broker, I should say, and who then contacts a buyer who's this German guy who recognises the use of this. I should say, when Nick is rummaging through this old guy's stuff, he does find these old photos from war, and it's Nazi stuff. So this guy was an old Nazi, is the implication. In fact, I think it's outright said. So he takes the books and the table to the dealer, who recognises the quality. He gives her a few things like candlesticks and says, "Yeah, this is just junk." So it feels like she might be just a bit of trying to get stuff cheap. But then once he shows her the table and says, "Oh no, this is real quality. This is worth a lot." For the 3 books, they say they will give him, I think, $10,000. But if he can find the 4th volume, it'll give him like something like $300,000, which bricks up his ears. So he immediately goes back to the lot with the German man in tow, and they start sort of going through it. Now he says to the German guy, "If you try and take anything, oh no, do not try and take anything." In a fairly sort of threatening way, when they get to it, well, I'm not sure I want to go on. I don't want to reveal all the secrets of this episode because it is worth a look. But there's a dark secret inside this locker, and it gets revealed. I have to say, some of the effects towards the end weren't spectacularly good, but they're okay. And I think the whole nature of it works out well. And there's also a denouement involving the lady who he's been very unkind to, who just wants to look through an old locker for any family mementos, pictures that he couldn't possibly have any use for, and he's just been a dick and saying no. So he there's that ties into the ending too. Fairly solid entry, this. I really, really enjoyed it. As I say, I'm going to go on to watch all of these, all 8, over a period of weeks, and I may do another program, another podcast, episode of Anthologic about this series to give you a kind of an overview. But it looks good. I think if you got Netflix, I think you could do worse than watch this. The first episode was 45 minutes, but they tend to range from somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. Those are the sort of length they are, and there's 8 of them. It's well worth a look. To some of the other titles, let me give you some of the titles of the other episodes. This was a fairly bland title, Lot 36. The next one's called Graveyard Rats, which sounds very Stephen King to me. Graveyard Shift and the rat, all that. The Autopsy, again, another one that sounds good, Stephen King. The Outside, Pickman's Model, which we've already discussed. Dreams of the Witch House, which is another Lovecraft story. I know that name, but yeah, that's interesting. And they picked 2 Lovecraft stories. The Viewing, which is one by Panos Cosmatos, and I look forward to that greatly because I think he's a great filmmaker. And The Murmuring directed by Jennifer Kent. Again, so I don't know if it's Babadooky, but it's the director of the Babadook and the lead actress from the Babadook, so it's going to be worth a watch, I think. Depending on what you think of the Babadook, I guess. I really liked it, but it had mixed opinions, let's put it that way. And the whole series has got generally favourable reviews in various sort of websites and so on. Very solid. Looking forward to watching this. Guillermo del Toro has always got something interesting to show us, though a lot of people prefer his early work. I've liked much later work as well as early, so I'm sort of neutral on the period of Guillermo. I just like Guillermo. Let's put it that way. So so fun watch this. Really enjoyed it. Very very good-looking piece of work too. And it's meant to be a gothic series, so that's kind of what it's all about. So I'm going to wind it up there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to